In the eerie stillness before dawn, the horizon glows faintly red, not with the promise of sunrise, but with the licking flames of destruction. Behind them marches a man whose name would become synonymous with both devastation and salvation, depending on whom you ask. What drives a man to burn cities to the ground, to tear at the very fabric of a nation in the name of preserving it? Born in Lancaster, Ohio in 1820, Sherman entered the world amidst upheaval. His father, a prominent lawyer, died suddenly when Sherman was just 9 years old, leaving his family destitute. The boy, nicknamed Cump, was taken in by a wealthy family friend, Thomas Ewing, a U.S. senator and political powerhouse. The psychological impact of such an early fracture in his life cannot be overstated. Losing a parent disrupts the foundational sense of security, and being absorbed into another family often exacerbates feelings of otherness. Sherman's later life, marked by both an unwavering commitment to duty and an aloofness from personal attachments, can be traced back to this formative experience. From an early age, Sherman exhibited a sharp intellect and a restless energy, qualities that would serve him well in his military career, but also isolate him socially. He entered West Point at 16, where his performance was characterized not by brilliance, but by discipline and competence. Unlike contemporaries such as Ulysses S. Grant, Sherman's rise was not meteoric. It was steady, marked by an unglamorous attention to detail and a deep understanding of logistics. Psychologists often speak of resilience as a double-edged sword. Sherman's ability to weather hardship and maintain focus came at the expense of emotional vulnerability. His military postings in the years before the Civil War took him across the country, from the chaotic frontiers of Florida and California to the backrooms of banking and administration. His time in the South, particularly in Louisiana, where he briefly served as the superintendent of a military academy, exposed him to the region's culture and deep reliance on slavery. The outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 was a turning point not only for the nation, but for Sherman himself. Initially skeptical of the Union's chances, he famously predicted a long and bloody conflict, a grim foresight born of his deep understanding of the South's resolve. Early setbacks in his military career, including a brief removal from command after being deemed mentally unstable, only deepened his resolve. Sherman's March to the Sea, the campaign for which he is most remembered, was both a tactical masterpiece and a psychological assault. In 1864, he led his army from Atlanta to Savannah, carving a path of destruction that targeted not only Confederate forces, but also the infrastructure that sustained them. Railroads were torn apart, crops burned, and towns left smoldering. His strategy was not merely to defeat the enemy, but to break their will, a concept that modern military theorists call total war. This scorched earth policy has sparked debates for over a century. Was Sherman a necessary architect of victory or a harbinger of unnecessary cruelty? In this stark pragmatism, one sees a mind that prioritized the larger goal of Union preservation over the immediate human cost. From a psychological perspective, Sherman's actions during the war can be seen as a projection of his own inner conflicts. The discipline and detachment that had served him in his youth were now amplified on a national stage. His ability to compartmentalize, to view destruction not as personal malice but as a tool of necessity, reveals a mind deeply attuned to the mechanics of cause and effect, but perhaps less so to the emotional wreckage left in its wake. Yet Sherman was not devoid of empathy. His letters to his wife Ellen during the war reveal a man profoundly affected by the suffering around him, even as he perpetuated it. Ellen, deeply religious and politically conservative, served as both a confidant and a counterbalance to Sherman's relentless pragmatism. Their correspondence offers glimpses of his internal struggle, a man torn between his duty to the Union and his awareness of the devastation it brought. Sherman's post-war years were a study in contrast. Celebrated as a hero in the North, he became a figure of hatred in the South, his name a byword for ruin. Yet he resisted the trappings of political life, refusing to run for office despite widespread support. "I will not accept if nominated and will not serve if elected," he famously declared, a sentiment that underscores his aversion to the theater of politics. Sherman was a man of action, uncomfortable in the realm of rhetoric and posturing. The psychological toll of the war lingered, manifesting in his later years as bouts of depression and a deepening sense of isolation. While his friendships with figures like Grant provided some solace, Sherman remained a solitary figure, haunted by the enormity of what he had witnessed and orchestrated. His writings, particularly his memoirs, reveal a man grappling with his legacy, at times defensive and at others reflective. Sherman's life invites us to consider the interplay between individual psychology and historical context. He was a man shaped by his era's tumult, yet his actions also shaped the course of that era. His capacity for destruction was matched only by his ability to endure, adapt, and persevere. In many ways, he embodied the contradictions of the nation he fought to preserve: ruthless yet idealistic, fractured yet resilient. Today, Sherman's legacy remains as contested as the war he helped to win. To some, he is a hero who understood the grim realities of conflict and acted decisively to secure victory. To others, he is a symbol of unchecked brutality, his march a scar on the Southern landscape and psyche. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. To view Sherman through a psychological lens is to see a man of immense complexity, a strategist whose brilliance was rooted in discipline and foresight, but whose actions exposed the emotional and ethical costs of war. His life reminds us that history's great figures are rarely one-dimensional. They are shaped by their times, haunted by their choices, and like the rest of us, subject to the quiet battles waged within their own minds. As the fires of Sherman's march fade into history, the questions he embodied remain. What is the cost of victory? Can destruction ever lead to peace? And how does a man reconcile the weight of his actions with the ideals he seeks to uphold? In the life of William Tecumseh Sherman, we find not answers but a mirror, reflecting both the heights and depths of the human condition.